Good evening and welcome to the August 15th, 2022 Policy Committee meeting of the School District of Haverford Township. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dr. Rishi, do you have anything to say at the beginning?
Yep. So on our agenda this evening, we have some policies that would be new to the district. So we have the recommended drafts from our solicitor's office. We have policies that are already in existence, but we're reviewing either the wording of them or we're looking at the administrative regulations that would be affiliated with those policies. So we will get right into it.
Okay, we have our, from our solicitor at Whistler Perstein, Justin Barbetta is here to help us walk through. We do have an ambitious agenda. This committee tends to meet every other month, and so we give it a 2-hour meeting window, and we will work diligently, try to get through as many of the policy discussions and promptly at 9, if not sooner. So with that, I will turn it over. Antoinette Snodgrass is someone who also helps lead the policy review, so I'll turn it over to her and Justin, and we can get started in the order that you want to talk through them.
Sure. Do you have a preferred order?
Not at all.
Okay.
However you want to handle it.
Well, then I think we should start with policy 006.1, since it's one that we have discussed quite a bit on this committee. It would be a new policy for us that would include, it originally was presented to the board or to the committee as being for remote attendance at board meetings, and the board previously discussed that we didn't necessarily want a policy that would encourage a single board member or single participant to participate in the board meeting remotely. And so we asked for our solicitor to give us a draft that would instead have a policy, an official policy for when the board itself would need to meet remotely. And so this policy would be really just for that procedure and how that would go in the future if the board would want to have a meeting that was primarily remote, and how we would expect participants, including board members, administration, anyone who's presenting, and the public to participate remotely in that primarily remote meeting. So let me get my notes on this. I'm happy to go through the policy. I think this is a useful policy to have, to just give the board and the public some guidance as to, when this would occur or how it would occur. And so I think it's useful in that way. Again, this would not be just for one particular person to remote in. We talked about at length before about why we didn't think that was necessary. But I'm curious to hear what our other board members think about the policy as a whole before we kind of delve into the language of the policy.
So I was wondering if the title would still hold then, remote attendance and participation at board meetings, since we're talking more about holistic board meetings being held remotely.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we want to look at.
I agree with that. Probably just remote participation at board meetings. Or remote
board meetings.
Remote board
Yeah.
One question I have, and I do think this helped clean it up and largely reflects the intent of the prior committee discussion on this. One thing I thought was worth just circling back on, under the definition where the board policy applies to a definition of board meeting, which includes committee meetings, all public meetings of the board, and then it says executive session and information sessions, and wondered if the board would benefit from some flexibility there, since those are not the same as public meetings, and could maybe more easily accommodate the logistics of a board member participating remotely, either by phone or a Zoom call, just for those two types of board-focused, you know, internal work?
I had the same comment, Bridget. I think that this policy should be for public meetings. Executive sessions, like you said, those are specific sessions that we have, for example, like with our attorneys, their attorney-client privilege, they wouldn't be broadcasted. And I don't think we need a specific policy to hold those. Like you said, we could do that over the phone. It doesn't have the constraints of the multiple participants that we have at our regular public board meetings or committee meetings. And so I agree. I think that should be taken out, and this should really just be for meetings that are held in the public.
Under authority, did you have more? I'm sorry.
Nope.
Okay, under authority, related, similar to the question about the title, given that we've kind of changed the nature of this policy, because it's not for an individual board member to participate remotely, I'm not sure that illness or travel are appropriate here.
Mm-hmm.
Unless we were all ill or we were all traveling at the same time, and then it seems like maybe we don't want to have a board meeting.
My only thought with that is that we needed to have a quorum. Like, so if something needed to get done
Okay.
and we needed to have a quorum, but we wouldn't have a quorum because like 3 people are traveling and 2 people are sick.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't think we necessarily
But
need
I
to
don't
say
think
that.
that this would get us a quorum because we specifically say individual board members may not attend a meeting virtually.
Oh, but I think Antoinette's saying that if the reasons why someone's not going to be here are one of those, then we can opt to say the whole meeting will be held
Oh, I see what you're saying. Then everyone would be virtual. Okay, I
someone's
see what you're
illness
saying.
or someone's
Okay.
travel needing a quorum.
Okay.
Is that what you?
Right, and because I totally agree. I think there are times when, you know, if that many people are just traveling or something, we wouldn't have the board meeting. I mean, but if something needs to get done in the district and it needs board approval, or if there's an emergency that would need board approval, then I think that we would, in that situation, okay, well, yeah, there are a lot of people traveling, a lot of people who are sick, but we really need to have this board meeting, and so that's why.
Okay.
I don't know if we necessarily need that, but that's what I was
Yeah.
envisioning with that.
Okay. Fair enough. I just wanted to bring that up. And then the other thing I wanted to say, under guidelines, the sentence, the individual board members may not attend a meeting virtually if the meeting is scheduled to be held in person. I think that's very clear. The paragraph before that, it makes it's a little confusing, right? Because this is where, you know, you're only attending virtually because we're all attending virtually. So I think maybe just changing the order of those and then making it clear, you know, when the board meets virtually as a board, you will only be marked present if, you know, that sort of thing. So just
Here, yeah.
clarifying that language. I think it's minor. It doesn't change
Right.
anything really, just for clarification.
I do agree, though, that this needs to be gone through and aligned to what we're saying the sole purpose of this is, which is remote board meetings. Because, you know, Laura, as you're bringing up, a lot of these points don't really apply, or they kind of get a little murky and muddy, and so why are we saying that? Talking about individuals, but doesn't really apply to individuals, it applies to the whole board. So I feel like this needs a rewrite.
I think some of it could be solved too if we stop focusing on board members specifically and said meeting participants.
Yeah.
And so even like the very first sentence, the board believes that the physical presence and participation of board members at board meetings greatly enhances the deliberations of the board. But I really think it's like the meeting is enhanced by the physical presence of the of the meeting participants. And so kind of changing it, like to Ms. Larson's point, like we can change it to that.
Justin, does that give you some clarification?
Sure.
Are there any open topics that you have then that
I don't.
clarification on our comments?
A lot of the feedback from prior meetings was based on what the vision for application would be moving forward. So that gives me the information that I need.
Okay.
I'm wondering in the authority portion, if we need to list all of these possible situations out, or if we're focusing more on weather conditions and emergency situations, that kind of bundles. I mean, like we were saying with illness applying to maybe an individual or individuals, like if you have a scheduling conflict, you have a scheduling conflict, like you're not going to come to the virtual board meeting.
I think we could maybe just change it to, including but not limited to, the need for a quorum. Because that's like these individual problems is what I see as like of just affecting a quorum.
Mhm.
So the need for a quorum or weather conditions or emergency situations.
Yeah.
Right, and then you're not focusing on any individual problem.
Mhm.
Right, so it's meeting the overarching need to like meet as a board to get board business done.
Mm-hmm. I also think that we should just be a little bit more clear that, this would include remote participation of public comment. Because we want to make sure that, it's not mentioned here at all. And so just to give the public, just clear understanding that this remote means would be for public comment as well. Like, we would not have public comment just because it's remote, is what I'm saying.
So you just want to qualify
Mhm.
after in accordance with the Sunshine Act and qualify that and add something with regard to public comment.
Yeah,
Maybe
like,
it's a guideline, right, where we specify about the procedures.
Or is this maybe just an addition to, was it 006 meetings, and just putting in the provision about meeting remotely? Because the meeting is still the same meeting, it's just being held in a different format.
yeah. And I think it'll become more clear too when we have less focus on the board member and more focus on just meeting participants. Maybe we could say meeting participants, including public comment, including those who sign up for public comment or something like that. Because I just want to make it clear that just because a meeting is happening remotely doesn't mean that public comment wouldn't happen.
I thought it was clear, like it says, all rules normally applicable to in-person meetings of the board. Like, I thought that was pretty clear.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to add including public comment to that, I mean, I think that would, I mean, if you wanted to specifically address that, just adding that little part, but I don't know that we need to delineate more than that. Cause I mean, that's what it is, all the rules.
Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Unfortunately, I think this needs to come back to committee. For like the 12th time. Thanks, Justin.
Sure.
So I just want to be clear, though, when we are going back for the rewrite, that it's focusing on the need and purpose of having a board meeting to get, board matters taken care of, or, hold these public meetings in a timely fashion. And like we were saying, not get bogged down by these other individual or remote aspects that are, I think, detracting from what I think we're now envisioning the policy to be.
Yep.
We can certainly address that moving forward.
Thanks. Okay.
Ready to move on?
Yes. Okay, I think from there, I don't think it matters which way we go, so, I can just go down the list that I have.
Yep.
If that works?
Mhm.
Okay, the next one I have is the international exchange student. I think this is just the administrative regulations for it.
These are the administrative regulations to policy 202, which is actually the eligibility of non-resident students.
Okay. It's like, the red line, is that based on the current administrative regulation, or what is it based on?
So the focus was keeping this in line with federal requirements. And so there were a couple substantive language changes, just really more clarifications with regard to age range for eligibility, lengths of enrollment, and then the requirements that English language learners be evaluated and then also required to take mandatory Keystones and PSSAs. So it's just adding in that regard. We did also make a recommendation that the term international exchange student be used instead of foreign exchange student. But other than that, it was very minor revisions, just for clarification purposes.
Okay, and so, sorry, just to be clear, the
red line was, is additions.
added.
Is, the red
revisions.
line is revision and
The black lettering is, was the former version.
of the administrative regulations. Okay. Yeah, and I think these are, I mean, the way that I rate them are pretty benign. You're saying they're really just to, conform to, federal regulations?
Yes.
So, I don't think I have substantive comments on it past then that.
And this is a policy that we felt was important for the high school administration to take a look at as well. So they have, our principal has reviewed that to see if there would be a challenge in any way, or, would there be any difficulty in meeting these regulations that we're putting out? And he does not believe so.
Great.
So I
looking
had
at
just,
line four-
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, looking at line 4, it says we'll take a maximum of 3 exchange students per academic year into the district. What was that number changed from? Having trouble seeing the red line.
I think they just added the 3 in
That was right,
parentheses.
yeah.
I see.
Staying
Okay,
three.
so it's been 3
Yes.
historically.
So I was just gonna note that, I saw the international exchange student defined, but then in other places it just says exchange student. So just some clarification on making sure those aren't 2 different types of student under this policy. And then I wondered in item 9, requests for admission of international exchange students must be submitted 60 days prior to the start of the school year. If, would it be possible to add a little clarification on like, to who? Is that a central administration thing, the high school office? Like just
Registry,
to
yeah.
give a little more information on what somebody does.
Yeah.
And then I wondered, because there are constraints in this policy on a number, like, is there's, and I don't know how this would be written to the administrative regulations, but do people start the process sooner? Because it's like, there's only 3 and then you're looking for a variety of countries. So if it's like, oh, we already have 2 exchange students from France, we're not going to take another one. Yeah, like how do people know, and how can they kind of begin that process? Who can they talk to? I think it would be helpful to reference in that one.
Well, I can say there was a period of time where we weren't accepting any students, and then this predates COVID, so it had nothing to do with COVID. It had everything to do with the availability of space, our enrollment. But, we've got the additional wing of the classrooms that were added on there, so we have started again. But prior to that, it really was like a first come, first serve. We didn't want to get into, we'll take this person and not take somebody else,
Mhm.
and then end up not even using the opportunity for 3 students to be here because no one else seeks this out.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to have it. I think it can be a really interesting addition to the school community and the cultural opportunity there. In number 11, it talks about the school district is not certified by the Department of Homeland Security under a certain program, so that students can't be accepted on a private tuition basis. And then it has in parentheses something is that FI? I don't know what, F1.
Visa type?
That's a type of visa. And maybe that could just be clarified because.
Yeah, and if you could spell out SEVP, because I was wondering what that stood for as well.
And in 12, where it talks about upon board approval and prior to enrollment, there's understandably some paperwork and affidavits and things that get signed. The last section of that, the last sentence of section 12 says, at the completion of these activities, appropriate schedule development can take place when the student arrives. That was a little unclear to me, like, these activities, are they just a couple of things in 12, or it sounds like more like referring to the more complete process that was outlined in some of the steps prior. And then I'm assuming a schedule development means like what classes the foreign exchange student or the international exchange student would take, like what placement they would have and things like that. But maybe that could just be clarified a little bit based on whatever kind of language or other assessments that would be done for the student's placement. And then 17 is clear that here's where it says exchange students, but not international exchange students, are not eligible to receive diplomas from the district, but they can get a transcript of grades. If a student is here for what would be a senior year, are they like, does that mean they're not invited to graduation? Like, I was not clear what that means, that they don't get a diploma.
So,
Go ahead.
sure. So it's, I mean, that's something that's not legally required, but the inspiration behind adding that, is to make it clear. I mean, in the majority of the situations, the student's not going to receive a district-issued diploma because they're going to be, part of the program is that they're going to be returning to their native country, or potentially moving on to post-secondary, but.
And we're not
but-
verifying all their credits from
Correct.
other institutions,
Correct.
like
So
understanding that, yeah.
But if you wanted to include, potential extracurriculars, there is some leeway with that,
I
where
was just-
certain aspects could be included.
I was just kind of curious, like what happens? It's like, oh, you were here for the year and
Sure.
your classmates are graduating, but yeah, like, it was just more of a
Sure.
like curiosity.
But I mean, I don't think there's nothing precluding the district from having some kind of a carve-out provision to acknowledge that student. Is that something that you would like us to add?
I don't know how often that even comes up, but I read, it says they wouldn't receive a diploma, and then I kind of thought about, the broader events around graduation.
I think too, it should have been clear from the beginning, but since this is an administrative regulation, this does not have to be voted on by the board. So this isn't gonna come before the board, but there's the administration, has a duty to just notify the board of these changes. So this is just like a notification, and the board obviously has an open dialogue with the administration on the administrative regulations. But so these can be really easily changed, and they don't need, 2 readings at the board and then a vote.
And it's
just for clarification.
timely because we have approved one international exchange student for this coming school year.
Yeah.
I had some questions about number 18. Does the student have the right to opt out of receiving English language development services as a regular, really enrolled student would?
No.
Why not?
No. So my understanding per PDE guidance is that we are required to provide that based on the initial evaluation.
Is that something you can look into though? Because other students, their families could elect to not have their child receive services. And again, I would wonder in this situation, who would sign off on that paperwork, right? To receive the notification that the student has been eligible. Is it the host family? Is it the family back in the home country?
It is the family in the home country, but I can take another.
And then there's language accessibility issues, so making sure that any of these things are communicated in a language that the family understands.
And just because I'm not as familiar with the English learning program, is a student eligible to test and not qualify for it, or were you saying that every?
So all students have to be tested,
International.
as far as my understanding goes. I'm less familiar with international exchange students. This is the first time I've actually come across this. But what happens with a student who is, a general English learner, their family would be notified of the student, if they qualify for services, right? So if the student places out and they have like a high level of English language proficiency, they don't receive services. That's
Okay.
the end of story, which some of our students might. But if they do qualify for services, there is that option to opt out of services. The student would still have to take the access test. That's like a sticking point, but I was wondering if that option exists.
Dr. Larson, I'm pretty confident that they still have to, because that's
Okay.
part of the assumption of them coming
Got
for
it.
the education
Okay.
in the States, but I will look into that.
Yeah,
to
just
confirm.
double check, thank you.
Does part 4 of that participate in the PSSA Keystone? Does that have to do with the ELL identification, or is that its own thing?
That's independent.
Okay, so maybe not underneath 18, like maybe that's its own thing? Because it seems like it's only for students
English
identified
learners.
as English learners, when
Oh, it's for everyone.
it's for all.
We could certainly-
Okay, just
That makes
maybe
a lot of
that's its
sense.
own.
And I think section 1, under number 18, I would consider rewriting to be assessed, and if identified as qualifying for receiving services, they would then be provided. So something that acknowledges there's that identification process in between assessment and instruction.
I think that's the last sentence in 18. Students identified as English learners shall. So they're already being identified as English learners there.
But you can't be identified as an English learner until you've been assessed.
Oh. Wow. Okay. Yeah, then that should be reworked.
And just because there are a lot of acronyms in this section, are these being used consistently? I see there's ELL and then EL in some places. Those, like, some programs still continue to use ELL where we've largely switched
The
to
state
just-
doesn't use them consistently.
Okay.
Actually checks. I was like, oh, it says ELL and it says EL. And I was like, no, it actually tracks though. It's
Okay.
consistent with what different
But there are
groups are using.
inconsistencies.
I'm wondering under 18, I'm not sure if this would be the place for it, but so we're talking about assessment identification. We're talking about the different tests that students would take. Is there anything in terms of, so in the state now you have to provide English language development throughout the school day, right? It's not just provided by the DCIU, ELD teacher or ESOL teacher. It would also be integrated, this is for all students, not just international exchange students throughout the school day. So like what supports are teachers getting to support English learners in the classroom? Learning about promising practices, learning about proficiency levels, how to best teach to those. Again, this might not be the place for it, but it's a consideration.
Any other comments on this AR? We can move on. And again, there's no recommendation to make because it doesn't go before the full board. So next up on my list is the communications policy 901, which is it's a revision of the policy, I believe. Can you give it a little introduction, Justin?
Sure. So toward the end of last year, there was a discussion regarding the consolidation of 4 different policies related to communications. I believe it was 901, 902, 910, and 911.
Maybe you have 7 or something.
Yeah,
one
I
in the middle.
apologize for the
Yeah.
last 2. But there was an attempt made at the last meeting to do that, and that draft spurred a lot of feedback from the committee. Some of the general instructions were to, in essence, kind of turn it over to the administration to come up with a communications plan, and then have some very specific regulatory language around that or related to it. So that is what this more updated version is that it's coming back. And a lot of it, per the recommendations of the committee, really does focus on the creation of a communications plan, which is going to be turned over to central administration to do that.
Thanks. Yeah. The policies as they were written and included in our policy handbook currently, they were kind of all over the place. There were like 4 policies that were just depending on who the district was communicating with. And so we didn't see a need for having so many different policies. It was confusing, I think, for anyone who's trying to read them. And so, for the sake of efficiency, combining them into this one broad policy and then leaving the specifics up to the district and this communication plan makes a lot more sense. And then this would have the chief communications representative for the district be the superintendent or their designee. So I guess I would just ask Dr. Rucci if she is able to speak with the administration and about the communications plan, or because that would really fall to your cabinet.
And Anna.
And Anna.
Deacon, yeah. And some board members may recall pre-COVID, we actually were starting to work on a communications
Okay.
plan. So we'll be able to pick that up. And
Great. I guess a very specific, nit I have is, I think that we can just take out through various channels in this first sentence, which is also the first paragraph. And to just say that the communications program is going to establish and maintain accurate, transparent, consistent, and timely communication, which informs the various stakeholders that are listed. Again, just really trying to tighten it up a little bit. Otherwise, I think it's short and sweet, and it gets, really to the heart of the matter, which is, that it's the board's direction to develop this communications plan and to have it in place.
Yeah, I think the older policy raised a lot of like specific requirements that we were concerned either were impossible to live up to or maybe missing things. So I think this is more appropriate for a policy that sets kind of the direction, and we'll be interested to see the communications plan and allow the flexibility to happen in there instead of like in each line of a very detailed policy.
Exactly.
So this is related to district communications, not board communications, or does the board fall under the umbrella?
I think the vision is that it could, and to an extent, I mean, the communications that may come out at various levels, sometimes from central office, I mean, they are a representative of the board. Is there a specific
Yeah,
area?
no, I was just wondering if we need to like spell it out or if it's just kind of assumed.
Right, the board and even like administrators and staff are not listed as under the purpose. If Dr. Larson, were you suggesting that specifying a broader audience there, or
I think so, if we're gonna name
stakeholders?
everyone. I don't know if we want to be named within this, but I mean, the district does communicate when board meetings are occurring. They broadcast board meetings, things like that. We have district business operations, like board something, student, staff, stakeholder activities. I mean, I don't know, maybe just put it in the list if we're listing things out.
I think that my impression of this policy was that the board fell within the district in this communication. And so I wouldn't think of it as the communications between the district and the board falling here, but rather the district, the board and the public. And so, I mean, actually what's interesting is if you go to their current policy, which is very different from this, but it actually talks about the board and the board communicating.
Right.
Right.
Which was completely inappropriate because it's not like the board gets together and writes communications. We don't do that. So, I think that's why the focus now has been changed from, it was the board is providing this information to families and the board is providing this communication. And now it's really the district because in reality, the district is the one who is putting out all these different communications. Just even like you said, even this meeting is being broadcasted, right, with help of our district. And so, I don't know if we need to spell it out. But I think if we do, then we need to put it in a separate way, including communications relating to the board or something like that. But not, I
Not
wouldn't
that
list
it's coming
it.
from us. I think
Yeah,
that's a
right.
really
I
good
wouldn't
point.
list it with the other stakeholders.
Yep.
The other just kind of point of context, this is, and a lot of the policies we're talking about tonight are under the 900 section, which is community. So
Mhm.
it is like community communications.
I think this might be solved by under authority. We have to achieve the purpose, the board directs the administration to create a school community communications plan, which shall provide opportunities for parents / guardians, students, stakeholders, and the school community to receive information. And we can say like in comma, including information relating to the board of directors. And then, that could help with, the question of how does this relate to board communications?
To the work of the board, so it's not necessarily about the board, but to the.
Just district-related information.
Information relating to the school
Yeah,
board?
information related to the district, because school board information is related to the district, as is, a snow emergency, or a newsletter, or whatever,
Regarding
like.
district business / operations / governance.
Just,
Oh, okay, you're in the
Up at
purpose
the top,
section.
Purpose and governance.
And governance, I like that.
Just so I'm clear, with the revision added to the purpose section, not the authority section.
That's what I heard.
Is that right?
That's what I said, but I don't know if that's what we want.
She didn't, yes,
I think
dictate that that's.
I think that's good.
I think that captures it.
We just want to make it clear. Okay.
I just wanted to reiterate, this version is so much better.
Yes, did you go and look at the last one?
Just
I mean, we
about to
did,
say
it was
that.
crazy, it was like a rabbit hole, we were confused, we're like, what's happening, like, this is just very, like, straight and to the point.
Yes, I totally agree. Do we want to recommend this as a policy for the board?
Yeah, I think the change that was
Right. was
resolved
that
here was
specific
a pretty
change?
small one that we can move forward with.
Hopefully, we were sufficiently specific.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I think then, this is probably one that we'll bring before the board for maybe not this meeting, but next meeting, I would think. We need some more time, not this Thursday, is what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so now next, is the administrative regulations to policy 901, which are also, I think, short and sweet. And again, it really focuses on, the development and implementation of the communications plan, which I don't think would be inside the AR, but would be a different document that the district would, create and develop and implement. And this is really just a little bit more details, media, and really, this is really more about the media. Media requests for information to district staff. So I didn't have any substantive comments on this other than, just making sure that it was reviewed by the administration, since, it mostly has to do with staff.
Just throwing this out there, is there anywhere where we should be addressing media requests for information to district students? Or board members? Like, do we want to expand that out or just keep it solely to staff?
I don't think we want to have it be, regulating students. I don't think that we have really the authority to do that.
It would be a pretty limited context. I mean, yeah, I would recommend leaving it the way that it is right now.
I think it's the same thing with the board.
Right.
I think
So
the
just
board-
district staff because they are in our employ, we pay
Correct.
them,
Mhm.
got it.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. But ARs were easy. Great.
Mhm.
We're done on policy.
Well, this committee has done the policy. It still has the different readings and approvals.
That is very true. Okay, so then the next one is policy, or on my list, sorry, I don't know, whatever. Is policy 912, research involving district students and staff. And I think this is a new policy.
New one,
Yes.
yeah. Hey, Dr. Rishi, could you speak to like the impetus for this and the context in which research involving students and staff happens?
Well, the impetus for many of the new policies really has come from, like, recommendations from our solicitor. So that's first and foremost where it starts from. In this particular instance, it does help us to have the backing of a policy such as this for any requests that we would receive. Typically, requests that we receive, we deny them. Even if it does come to, a district employee conducting research. We do not engage our students in any type of research. Having a policy now just gives us stronger legs in order to move forward with it.
Can you give examples of what kind of research inquiries you get?
Sometimes if we have employees who are working on a doctoral dissertation.
I wondered about that,
Yep,
yeah.
that's not unusual at all. As soon as we say that we don't see how that, can work with our students, most are very accepting of that. In the time that I've been here, we have not had other, institutions ask. I think most know that they're not gonna come in cold and have a district say, sure, go ahead. However, elsewhere where I have worked, there was a project at the University of Pennsylvania, and through some of the work that we were doing, we engaged middle school students as participants in a study that was being conducted by Penn. But very similar to this, permission from all of the parents, kids that would be involved, and was not taking a lot of time away from their instruction. We've not had such a request in the time that I've been here.
I think this is a sensible policy to have for the reasons that you've articulated. I think what I would like to see included in it is that it doesn't preclude a student from participating in such a study on their own. So I guess just because this seems to me like it would be something that the district would not be facilitating. But if you have a friend, or if there's someone in class and they want to, not in your class, because I know that there's an exception for organizations in the district, but I guess I just want to make it clear that this doesn't preclude someone from on their own going out and participating in some sort of survey or study. Do you know what I'm saying?
Independent of the district.
Completely independent from the district. And so I just
Yeah,
want
we
to make it
wouldn't-
clear that this is for
We wouldn't
the
look to
district
regulate that.
facilitating it.
Okay,
Right?
right.
And just making it clear that this is not precluding anyone from doing anything on their own individual time and on their own,
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I know through our pediatrician, like they'll
Sure.
say, do you want to participate in whatever, safe driving practices or whatever, like those kind of, there might be ones on study skills or things like that come up. So that's a good point that,
I think it's like pretty clear that this is made for the district and for the, through the district, but I just want to be crystal clear. This doesn't stop anyone from doing anything on their own.
I think that's an important point, and that could go up in the purpose. Generally not permit educational research or surveys involving district students and or staff, and then something to do like district property or during the school day, or to make that more clear.
Yeah, I even think the district will not facilitate
Yeah.
educational research, will not permit facilitation of educational research or surveys involving district students or staff. And so it's just really the district acting in that scenario. You could just say the district or its employees, making sure that, if there was a staff member or something that was going for their doctorate and they wanted to use their class, that would count under this policy, right? You can't just go and have, the class email you all their favorite colors or something.
So looking at the purpose again, just wondering, how does this fit in with the surveys that the district administers to its own students? I mean, I think it's kind of fleshed out below, but should that be more clear in the purpose that we're talking about outside entities or like non-district sanctioned uses?
oh, right, it says involving district students and staff, but it doesn't say,
But maybe by outside entities.
yeah,
There.
something to distinguish from the assessments or surveys that the district itself conducts is
There's
not.
a very good definition of outside entity, the next
Right,
paragraph, so
later,
that
right.
should just be included in the purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I'm wondering, how would that be impacted when you have a teacher who wants to, conduct research in their classroom? They're not an outside entity. So like, how do we be all encompassing of those things up in the top there?
It does include it. So a district employee conducting research in the employee's personal capacity is included in outside entity. It's included in the definition.
I see, because it's not a purpose, got it. Yes, yep.
I do like, as someone who does ed research, I do like it, that you do leave yourself open, like, just in case there was a study that came along that you like were really, really, really excited about and you thought it was really important to the institute or to the district, that you do leave that little window open just in case. Not that it happens often, but like, I do think that that is important. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that I know for a lot of researchers, when they are using like student interviews or student assessments, they have to get IRB approval. And I didn't see anywhere that that was a requirement in here, but I think that you might want to think about that. I don't know where IRB approval comes in the process, like
Tell me
they
what
have to
IRB
get, sorry, it's Institutional Review Board.
Okay.
So anytime you are, hang on, I'll just tell you what this means. Hold on. Let's see. It's for human subjects research. So anytime you're going to be doing anything related to human subjects, you have to go through, at your institution, usually you have to go through this internal review board, or institutional review board, excuse me, so IRB. And it just permits, you know, the individual, like it reviews that individual's research and says that that individual has met some threshold of quality, privacy, da 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 da. Every, you know, faculty member that would be doing that would have to get this approval before they could issue any kinds of questionnaires, anything like that, right? So it's like, before somebody would reach out to you about this, they would probably get IRB approval,
probably
I would
have that.
think.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would think. And
Good
the same
housekeeping
thing, like,
kind of thing.
if it were somebody that were getting their master's or their doctorate, even an employee of the district, they would probably need that before they could do it. So just, it's like just one extra layer of protection for the district. Because if they don't have that, I would imagine it probably wasn't a very good study and we probably wouldn't want to be a part of it anyway, right? So, I don't know exactly where that would go, but probably under the delegation of responsibility, it lists those three things. So probably somewhere in there.
Or maybe in the ARs.
Yeah, or maybe in the ARs. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that because that is pretty standard protocol, at least for university related research. I don't know if it's for like private organizations doing research, but it is really common for university related research.
That sounds like a good standard of quality
Yeah.
to
So
attain.
I'm sorry.
Are there any other specific comments for the policy itself before we move on to the AR?
If I could just add briefly, so
Sure.
for this carve-out provision, for an individual student or family who may want to participate, I would recommend if we're going to do that we make it subject to a standard of reasonableness, because if it requires classroom observations or something like that, and that's the only student who's going to be observed,
Okay.
that we account for that. And then also that in that instance, the project or the individual conducting the study, more or less that's not going to be subject to the regulations where it's district approved, because if that student or family wishes to, you know, sign a student records request and offer that information up to the individual, what then happens?
Right, we can't be responsible for
Right,
that.
we have certain regulations that we're going to enforce as far as, you know, results of the study, public, you know, presentation to us prior to any publication, things of that nature, that's not necessarily going to be.
I think under your first point, I am thinking there's the, it was called like the visitors to school, which policy was it? But that wasn't like just coming to watch a performance, but it was like the observations and things like that. So that policy maybe could be referenced as setting the parameters under which a student during the school day can be observed by
Yeah.
someone conducting a study or whatever. But the second part, I think, yeah, the reasonableness and, you know, it can't be a distraction. It can't be like, oh, I'm doing a study, I'm
Yeah.
participating in a study, I'm not doing my lab, or like not doing the homework.
So I pulled up Lower Merion's policy, and they have a few things at the bottom, I think relate to what Laura was bringing up with IRB. We might want to consider, so they have an application process to ensure the potential positive outcomes of the research outweigh the burden to the district, which is part of IRB. You have to have the positive outweigh any potential negative or harm. And then ensuring that the research study is conducted with the highest ethical standards. So that also falls under IRB. And then something else they have is notification to the board of approved research studies prior to their implementation. So I'm not sure if that's something as a board we would want to know if there's research going on in the district.
Like district sanctioned research is what you're saying, or just outside of it?
No, just any outside entities conducting
Okay.
research with our students. Again, just things I noticed in a
Mhm.
neighboring policy.
I think some of those concepts are not as clearly laid out, but in the administrative regulations, it talks about the research proposal must be of sufficient scope and depth to justify the time, and that the instructional activities will not be interrupted unless there's a clear significance. So that weighing of the imposition, if any, that the research would impose, and then the benefit to be gotten out of it is included in these ARs.
I think I'd like to at least see something in the policy that mentions the importance of, high ethical standards,
Mm-hmm.
students and staff.
There is a confidentiality provision that's a requirement. But we can certainly add to that if that's,
Confidentiality is, yes, it's harder in practice than it is in word, right? Like, yes. I do think it's important just to note other aspects of ethics. It's not just about confidentiality. And then, just going back, so in the bottom it says, the superintendent or the designee shall be informed of the results of the educational research. So I had mentioned the other policy, it brought up informing the board of research. Is that something as a board we'd be interested in, or we don't need to include that in our policy?
I think you should, if it's outside research, that the board should know.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I
Say
agree.
the superintendent or the designee and the board of school directors
Mhm.
shall be informed of the results.
Informed of the results, or that the research is going to occur?
That the research is going to occur.
Okay.
Okay.
Both.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
usually you have, yeah, exactly, it's gonna happen, and then, so what were the findings? So like,
Yeah,
what is the
both.
information out there about our district? How is this report being used and
Right.
disseminated to the public?
On the AR, the very first sentence, it says that the regulation is intended to provide guidance to the board when implementing the policy, but it really should be the administration
that's a typo.
Mm-hmm.
or the district.
Right. Good catch.
I didn't have any other specific red lines for this one.
No, neither did I, but I think some of the comments or
Yeah.
discussion, we'd like to see either in the policy or the ARs where appropriate.
Right. We want to bring this one back to committee before we suggest it. I mean, it's a proposed policy. So I think we could probably just bring it back to committee. I don't think it's like
Mhm.
an urgent one to go to the board right now. And we have, I think, quite a bit of substantive revisions here. So we'll bring that one back. All right. Moving on down to 913, which is relations with non-school organizations / groups / individuals. So this is a red line of the current policy, right?
Yes, and it really, one thing that it could be, that might probably address a lot of the concerns that I can anticipate is it could also be retitled.
That's exactly what was
As
gonna
the
be my.
distribution of materials,
Yeah.
by non-school groups.
Yeah, I was like communication from, distribution by
Right.
non-school organizations, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the word relations or relationships in these
Means nothing.
signify like, yeah, that it's like more of a partnership, more dynamic, and this is, the policy is here really specific on, this is why we don't put the stuff in the backpacks anymore, the handouts in the backpacks
Right.
anymore, right? This is on the distribution of information. Any other comments?
The second sentence in the definition of non-school organizations, groups, or individuals, I feel like it's trying to be broad, but it's actually being too narrow. Because it says this policy shall apply to employees, students, parents, guardians, board members, or others, when they're acting on behalf of non-school organization, group, or individual. And I almost just think we should say anyone. The policy applies to individuals or groups when they are acting on behalf of a non-school organization, group, or individual. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's the point to call out these to make sure that they know that they're included, or
That
just.
That was part of it. I mean, this is also revised from this 2009 version. So we tried to keep as much of the language here as we can without just completely eliminating large sections, so you maintain some of the former version and you can see that, but your point's well taken.
Right, I just think because we list out so many different groups that it applies to, it almost seems limiting. I know it says or others, but it just, because what groups that I thought of that weren't included here, are members of the community, members of media,
Volunteers.
volunteers, yeah, I don't know. It's, like I said, I feel like it's trying to be broad, but it actually seems like it's limiting.
Right. Although I did, like, reading through the list, that students is included, did catch my eye that, even like students can't be like, oh, I'm on this, baseball team, I'll bring sign-up sheet for everybody, and,
Yeah, right, because it's a non-school organization team, yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if there is benefit in naming some intended, applicable parties that maybe wouldn't normally be considered, or.
Yeah, and for the lawyers in the room, like, how does this kind of, I'm thinking about free speech here, right? And like distribution of literature materials, where are these things kind of meshing or not meshing? I know, I completely understand the reason why we have this, but can we really limit what students are distributing?
It is.
I think to an extent you can, but
I'm sorry.
there was a First Amendment question. Can we limit
Sure.
what students are disseminating?
Sure. Well, and actually, if you look in the regulation, a lot of the First Amendment issues are regulation related to that, in a limited public forum that's listed out on the second page.
The listing here that are libelous, violate laws, violate policy, that you're saying, that's the list of just what's prohibited?
Yes, so that accounts for, and I guess, because I'm gonna parse that out into two different points. As far as regulation of student speech, you have a policy in the 200 section. To I apologize.
Student expression, 220?
Yes,
Distribution, posting of materials.
yes, 220 and the AR for 220.
Maybe we should reference that here.
More applicable. We can certainly do that as a cross-reference.
As a cross-reference, that's what I mean. And so maybe we shouldn't include students here if we already have a specific policy that's for students.
And I'm thinking like, what happens if, an outside, someone hands a student materials, like, go distribute this, it's like not coming from the student. I just feel like it gets like really murky really quickly.
I think in that instance, though, if the recommendation is to make it broader or kind of broad sweeping, then you're gonna account for that
Right, okay.
instance.
It's also a request from non-school organizations to distribute materials, so it really seems like it would be
Mhm.
someone
Yeah.
asking district personnel to distribute it, right? So it's more than just, so I really think a student probably can distribute that,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
And so I don't think that we're gonna prohibit that, but I think in this instance, it's saying, okay, a third party comes in and asks the teacher, right, or the principal to distribute it to everyone. And this is governing that scenario. Is that right?
Yes.
And I think with the sentence that I sort of was struggling over before, it might just be solved by adding on included but not limited to. And so the policy shall, applies to the following groups, including but not limited to employees, students, parents, guardians. If we want to list them out and make sure that everyone of these specific groups know that they're included, then we can do that.
So is this policy then intended just to focus on requests from non-school organizations, groups and individuals to distribute? So it stops at the request? Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ARs spell out how to get permission or
Right.
where to make the request.
And that's why Ms. Wiedemann brought up the backpacks, right? Like, why doesn't this come home in the backpack, right? Because that's a teacher going into every student's cubby or whatever it is and distributing that flyer or whatever it may be.
So can the title then start with the word requests by, non-school organizations, et cetera, to distribute materials or something to that effect, because it is just the request?
Yes, I think the title should be changed, and it's interesting that I think this was originally, the district's current version was originally modeled off the PSBA language, and PSBA has since also modified, I want to say maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, and it is really just focusing on the distribution, so we can certainly address the title.
So it's focused on distribution, not requests, but we're focusing on requests. Do we also want to focus on distribution?
Well, it's both.
Okay. And I think that needs to be spelled out in the purpose. Any requests seeking to distribute?
Requests to distribute.
But it doesn't, it's just the request, right? It stops at the request, like whether they distribute it or not, doesn't seem to be covered within this.
It's whether they grant the
Under the
request or not,
purpose.
right? And if they grant the request, then they would be distributing it. But if they deny the request, this is why that's being denied.
I mean, let's play it out. There could be a request that's approved, and then when an administrator or the teacher sees the materials, it then is triggering a further analysis where it would potentially be disqualified.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I was thinking of this maybe the wrong way then. So I was thinking that we don't honor requests or accept requests or approve requests from non-school organizations, groups, or individuals, like, full stop. And I thought that's what this policy was.
Oh, so you're wondering if there's ever an instance when a request is made that is granted?
Yes.
I think it
So
is.
that might be, yes, like and that's what we use, the community page on our website, like we'll let people know, we will post it on the community page.
Right, and it's not endorsed by the school district.
And
Mhm.
yeah,
Yep.
So maybe under the purpose, as Dr. Larson put it, it starts off any requests, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. And then before, the shall be governed, maybe it's any requests in that clause, and the approved distribution shall be governed by this policy and company regulations.
Yeah, I like that, because the very first bullet point on the AR is that, the district's communication forums, are only open on a limited basis. So, but it does clearly, contemplate approving requests.
As we are revising this, I just want to go back to something that we've been talking about in previous meetings, which is, palatability for the average reader, right? As I'm reading through all these revisions, I'm trying to think of myself as a parent and like, does this mean that I couldn't send my child with a birthday party invitation to give to their classmate? Would that violate this policy? I honestly don't know. By reading this, I'm not 100% sure. Or, join the Girl Scouts or something. Like, I don't know where that would fall in this. So as we're thinking about revising it, just making sure that any average person would be able to read this and really understand how it would apply to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that what needs to be emphasized again is really the district's role here, because a student can bring in birthday invitations, they can bring in Girl Scout flyers, but they can't give them to the teacher to give to everybody, right?
Right.
And so that's really what this is governing, is again, like the district participation in the distribution.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, we don't want people putting stuff on school bulletin boards, like,
Yeah.
because then it implies that this is a district act. Like, I understand the intent of it. I'm just saying, like, for practical purposes, we just need to make sure as we're making, because we are kind of heavily redlining this one. And it hasn't been reviewed in 12 years? 13 years. So yeah, just as we're revising it, some of the language I think is getting a little thick, for the average reader. So, just, like I said, I understand the intent of what we're going for, and I agree with it. I think that's reasonable. But just thinking about, how someone would read this and understand how it applies to them.
Did this policy originally come out of a lawsuit? If I'm remembering, wasn't there like something with like
2009? You remember?
2008? No. I just remember hearing about this. There was like an evangelical group that was distributing literature in students' backpacks. Is that?
I don't know if this policy came out of that, but that is the situation that did occur.
My understanding is that there was no policy prior
Okay.
to that incident. I don't know, and as Dr. said, I don't think that this was directly dictated by that, but this is,
It like highlighted the need to have a policy.
it's consistent with what PSBA's
Yep.
previous version was back in 2009.
So look, the red lines that have been provided tonight, did they consider PSBA's recent revisions?
I will say this, if in order to fully take that on, it would also result in probably the creation of 2 additional policies.
Oh my goodness.
Because what they then did was they created a separate recommended policy for like relations with booster clubs and things like that. So
that would be like the BOPS, band and orchestra parents, the soccer boosters, football boosters, that kind of stuff.
we can certainly,
No, I'm not saying yes. I was just clarifying for people, like that.
yes, yes.
And so currently those, closely affiliated, obviously, aligned community groups are treated like a PTO, who we also see as kind of partners in the school's mission, but are
To be
a
clear,
separate organization, right?
Right.
Dr. Rashid, would that be correct, that the boosters kind of fall under that? So
Yes.
we're not missing anybody because of the way this one's done?
No. and again, because as everyone identified, I think we've hit it 5 times at this point, that this really is focusing on regulating the distribution, the request and the distribution of materials. And that's likely what led to PSBA changing it and then creating the additional policies.
Mm-hmm.
Which I will say they're extremely esoteric, and a lot of it focuses on good partnership and things of that nature, which I think we've probably discussed in previous meetings, don't necessarily need to go into policies all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're looking for bright lines.
Because we do call out the parent-teacher organizations, is there some value in not just singling them out, but and saying and booster groups or something, like to show that it's not just them that's being called out in the non-school organizations, but others that we kind of handle in the same way?
Not from any kind of legal standpoint, but we certainly could add to that and add additional groups.
I would suggest included but not limited to, that if we go down that direction.
I just didn't know if PTO really like stood on its own as being called out, or if there was a reason to catch some of these other affiliated groups.
I think the notion behind it was really just that is probably one of the groups that there's a tendency to almost consider as the long arm of the district. So that's why I delineate the one that probably is
most people
misconstrued.
recognize. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's fine. We can.
I think that's totally right. People don't realize that they're completely separate.
Are we good on this one? I was just gonna do a time check. It's 8:15 and I've got 9:14, 9:16, 9:18, and 9:20 and 6:27, which comes from a different section, and wanted to just ask Dr. Rushi if, with the 45 minutes remaining, is there a different order or priority that you would have to make sure that some of these get talked about tonight?
Thanks, Ms. Wiedemann. The only thing that I will bring to the attention, and I don't know if it refers to and pertains to the individuals who are here this evening, but we did receive a phone call to the office today asking specifically about policy 627, and was it on the agenda tonight? So there may be people who are here specifically for that. So if there's a way that we could look to, just to make sure, out of respect for their time, that we make sure that we address that before 9 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, numerical order.
I don't even think I was going in numerical order, but yeah, let's just do 627 next.
Set the timer, we'll just like parse it out.
So moving on to 627, which is a proposed policy. So this would be a new policy for the board. It's titled District Initiated Real Estate Tax Assessment Appeals. And again, it would be in the 600 level of the policy manual, which is for finances. Can you give a brief introduction of the policy?
Sure. So I'll try to keep it.
Well, and before Justin starts, this is a policy that we actually some time ago had talked about taking a look at, and then life changed for us all. So we're looking to bring it back. So yes, it would be a new policy for us, but it is something that the board did discuss previously.
Sure. So the background of this is that every property within the district is assigned a parcel identification number and a corresponding assessment value, which isn't the actual believed to be fair market value of the property. there's an application of a ratio that needs to be completed in order to arrive at the fair market value. The legislature has authorized property owners within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to appeal on an annual basis the assessment or property value, indicated fair market value of their property. They have also authorized political subdivisions to appeal in the same exact manner. So the deadline to do that each year, I believe in Delaware County, is August 1st. So it's just passed. That's the reason we're bringing it to your attention now, is that if this is something the district would be interested in pursuing moving forward, it's something that we recommend go through the process with the committee and then ultimately the entire board to set up the next steps moving forward if the district was going to consider evaluating the assessments of the properties within the district and potentially appealing them to what the actual fair market value was, if assuming that they're incorrectly assessed.
And just a note that the assessments are not a number that's derived by the district, but is given to us by the county level, does the assessment.
That's right.
So we have the data, but we don't generate that, but we do run our tax rolls off of the information that we have.
That's correct.
So just a general question on the policy itself. Is this a PSBA recommended policy? Where does the language that we're seeing in front of us come from?
So at this current moment, there's kind of, I'll say, ongoing litigation, so to speak. It's come up in, I want to say, at least 3 or 4 different times before the intermediate appellate courts, the Commonwealth Court. There's actually not a requirement at this point that there be an explicit policy. However, we would recommend that if it's something that the district is considering or potentially would move forward with, that you have something so the community is aware of the steps that will be in place. There's actually, and it would be remiss of me to walk away and not say this tonight, there is actually a case pending before the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania right now as it relates to appealing based on recent sales of properties alone, and then potentially monetary thresholds related to those recent sales of properties. There was a pretty famous case that came out, I want to say in 2017. It's the Valley Forge Towers case, and several propositions came out of that, one of which was political subdivisions cannot file assessment appeals based solely on a property type. And in that instance, the appeals were being taken strictly against commercial properties, and residential properties were not even being considered, even though some of them potentially could qualify. So that there is this case that I believe they're supposed to argue it at some point in September. I want to say the middle of September. So that is out there. It's not necessarily going to undo a political subdivision's right to be able to file the appeals on their own, but it will likely regulate to an extent what practices would be permissible moving forward.
And so the policy that's proposed, I read this as more kind of like the rights and authority. This policy doesn't have any of those parameters to outline when, under what circumstances, to what extent the district would exercise a right to appeal evaluation. Is that something then that we would negotiate in the ARs that go with it?
At this point, given that there is this case at the highest level within the state right now, the recommendation would be, if we decide to move forward with the policy, to wait to craft the administrative regulation to make sure that the practice will be legally compliant moving forward. Mm-hmm. Because as of right now, there are several different ways that appeals could be taken or properties could be identified for an appeal. But that potentially may change, by December, January, February of next year, when this decision comes out.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because I actually think that that's probably the most important piece of this policy.
Kind of what I was thinking.
And just
too.
looking at the policy itself, it doesn't say that much to us or to the public about when or why appeals would be taken. And so I think without the ARs spelling it out, I don't think this is quite a useful policy. So I think what I would be looking for would be to have a clear threshold that is identified not based on any specific properties, that year, but just based on a threshold of, we think it's egregious for a property to be underassessed by 50% or something like that, and to just have it, just be completely taken out of any sort of individual context, and put, just a general flat
Sure.
percentage or something like that.
Sure. Then it might be prudent to put this kind of, I don't want to say on the back burner, but that is what I,
Okay.
in practice, what I mean. To wait and see what comes out of that decision, because I think the anticipation from, I'll call it the tax assessment bar, is that there is going to be direction coming out of that court case. There was actually previously a case before the Supreme Court, which the Supreme Court ended up determining wasn't ripe at the time. So people were waiting for clarification at that point, and it didn't happen. So there's an expectation, I don't know if it's necessarily going to happen, but that we'll have more clear-cut guidelines coming out based off of this decision that's pending.
And
Because.
just a clarifying
Okay.
point, will we be undertaking any tax assessment appeals between now and when this decision comes out?
Likely not, because being
I
that
just
the
wanna
deadline,
clarify.
no, it wouldn't hamstring or hinder the district's ability. I mean, assuming that, and again, I mean, if the decision is not issued until July of next year, then maybe, but.
So we should have the draft.
But I would think that we're pretty, if they argue next month, it's likely going to be probably the first quarter of next year, which would give the district adequate time.
And there have been questions of appeals that have come before the board. The last time they did, the board did not act on them or move forward. So that was for the prior tax period. Then we didn't have any that we acted on for as of August 1st. I do think, I agree that the parameters are where the real meat and interest of this is, but as part of that, I'm not opposed to having the purpose and the authority clarified and referenced in this document, right? Yeah, I wouldn't just toss this because I think there is some value. One word in the very first line of the purpose, the board has the responsibility of equalizing the cost of providing a quality education. Of equitably allocating the cost of the quality education. Yeah, I don't think equalizing is our goal in that context, but I think other aspects of describing kind of the obligations, the rights, the process and the authority we should hold on to for when we are able to get that guidance on making more transparent what the board's parameters would be.
Yes. I guess I just really don't see a lot of clarity happening around this policy if we move forward with it without an AR. And
I'm not saying to move forward with the AR.
Okay.
Yeah, if you said back burner, I'm like, yeah, but
Okay.
let's hold on to this because I think this has
Yeah.
some useful context when we're able to add to it the part that is more meaningful to the board's decisions and the community to understand. Saying that I thought this was a good but insufficient start until we have that other
Yeah,
information.
and I think that I certainly understand watching and waiting for cases. I think it can often be fruitless because of, moot, ripe, settlement, anything can happen. And so I would say we should put a deadline on this and say, if we don't have something by January from these court cases that we're watching, then this comes back with an AR, with a drafted AR. And maybe we have, someone, an expert or a tax attorney or someone come and talk to the committee about what those ARs should look like, or talk to the administration in crafting them, and just get sort of information on that. I don't I threw out a number today, but I'm not an expert, and so that means, that's, was not by in any means, something to rely on. And so in crafting the ARs, I would want to see something that, was really crafted by the experts in the space. And I think if we, like I said, I think it takes a long time for the board to run through its policies, through the committee, going through 3 meetings, right? It takes 3 board meetings to approve a policy if it goes as fast as possible. And so I would think that we'd want something, if the deadline is August 1st, we want to have this in place well ahead of that.
That's absolutely fine. And I mean, I could continue to speak on it, but I mean, typically yeah, I mean, right now, monetary thresholds as of today are acceptable, meaning that the delta or the difference between what we believe the property should be valued at and what it's currently valued at. I mean, generally, most districts are looking somewhere between 10 and like 20,000 in an increase in revenue. So if we were to appeal and if it was to be properly assessed, then that's what the makeup or the extra revenue for the district would be. As of right now, that's legally acceptable. That is something that is being somewhat, to some extent, in a very limited circumstance as it relates to recent sale prices being challenged before the Supreme Court right now. So,
Okay.
but I can make a note that
I would say if we don't talk about it before, we should talk about it at our first committee meeting in 2023.
Okay.
Can I just make a small language suggestion? Under authority, the county board of assessment is then referred to as the board, and that gets confusing because sometimes it switches between us as the board and them as the board. So I would just always call them the board of assessment, and we are the board.
The BOA, if you need to
Yeah, or
shorten
something,
it,
if you
but
need to
like,
shorten it, yeah, right, ever,
the
yeah,
acronym.
that's fine, but I definitely would not use the language the board. That was all, it was just a minor,
A good
just a
point.
minor change.
And just to follow up on a point you made and just to kind of clarify past practice, even without this policy, I think the policy does reflect, the information. I mean, this is just kind of the purpose and the authority, and that has been in existence for a long time. So the board did get legal counsel and had a solicitor advise us as these matters arose. So that has been our practice and continues. We continue to have executive sessions or information sessions for the board to understand these complex matters.
Absolutely. Okay. That one is getting tabled.
Is the public allowed to comment?
We have public comment at the end of the
At the
meeting,
end, okay.
and we plan on ending before 9.
Okay, thank you. Did I have to sign up for that?
No,
Not in the
Not in the
committee.
committees. Okay. We can continue. The next policy on my list is policy 914, relations with the intermediate unit. Okay. I guess I have a couple questions on this because it talks about a review prior to the IU budget. Of either the full board, I think, or the committee, or I think that was my comment, is whether we should say that it's of the full board or of a committee. And then obviously Dr. Larson is our IU liaison, and so, particularly looking for your opinion on this, but I didn't have specific red lines to this one, just a question of if we put something in here, giving ourselves a deadline of a, particular type of review prior to the IU budget, just so that we know, maybe Dr. Ocean knows this, is the IU budget, is at the same time every year? And so we can just consider it, at the, the meeting prior to that IU budget. That's always when we talk about, have a presentation on it, or what does this review mean? Those are my questions about this policy in general.
So I think they're two separate things. I think, because the IU provides so many different services and supports, and they have many budgets, that then, get passed down to us and what we pay to the IU, it might be worthwhile to consider a couple meetings out, have a presentation of, what are the programs, what are the offerings, how are Haverford students benefiting from this relationship, and then follow that up with a budget presentation, and, what our money is going to specifically. That would just be my input, but I do think it's very important to, before we have that vote, have access to that information. I personally think it would be useful for the whole board to have that rather than just a committee. Since there are services, I feel like, kind of cross committee lines.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking, we see a lot of, on the Finance and Facilities Committee, we see the budget presentations, really in-depth at those. And so my thinking was maybe this could be put into one of those, one of those longer ones where we really go into detail on, okay, the thinking of the pie chart and where, each piece of the pie, what does it represent? What, really dive deep into that. But I do understand what you're saying. Maybe it is appropriate for the full board. And I know, Martha does give a budget presentation to the full board, I think more than once.
You could recite parts of it.
Yeah, right. Yes.
Sure, and we can look at that. We had, I can't remember, Dr. Larson, if it was to the curriculum committee or to the full board.
It was curriculum.
It was the curriculum.
Yeah,
committee.
did Dr. Edelberg come and speak?
Yes,
Yeah.
Dr. Edelberg came, she spoke about the various programs,
Yep.
spoke about the technical schools, so we can look to make that
And
a
they're
regular.
willing, so we could absolutely
Yep.
like arrange for that. I was like, so new to all of this,
Mhm.
in the beginning of the school year, but I think this time around I can absolutely support in arranging that.
Great.
I'm gonna disagree. I think I prefer it better in committee. We are a committee of the whole and our meetings are recorded, so I feel like that is a better presentation for the committee. I feel like, I don't know. I thought the curriculum, I feel like do it more justice because we have more time.
It's a longer.
It's a longer
longer
meeting and there's
presentation.
usually less on the agenda, so we can give it more time.
More discussion, I think it engenders
Yeah, there's more discussion and it's a committee of the whole, right? So anyone can be there and it is recorded, so anybody that was not there certainly has the opportunity and should in fact review that meeting anyway. And then similarly, if we're gonna separate it into kind of a presentation about services and a budget, then the budget presentation should go to finance and facilities. Right? That just kind of makes sense to me to kind of parse it out. And then again, I agree, everybody should review that, but that's kind of the purpose of the committee of the whole. And then I feel like that way we have more time to ask questions and that is dedicated time for that.
Could we do a combined meeting with curriculum and finance one evening that would be dedicated to the IU? I just feel like it would be helpful to maybe see those things in tandem, right? So it's like, here's what we offer, and here's what we provide, and here's the value to the district.
And what the district pays for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's
And what
reasonable.
portion of budget that is.
And I believe that approach might actually be helpful to the IU because we all engage in the budget process at the same time. So
Going
they have
around to all the
requests
districts,
from
so.
a number of other districts as well, so perhaps we look at a combined meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, because I feel like their presentation at the curriculum committee meeting was excellent, but it was long.
Yeah.
And it was detailed, and it was great, and it was good, but I don't, for a normal business
action-
meeting,
action,
that's
yeah.
not really business, right?
Maybe like a special meeting.
Right, it's a lot. I think it's a lot for a regular business meeting.
And the presentation, as I recall, went over the kind of the programs and services, but not kind of the governance and the cooperative funding and the
Yeah.
payment side of supporting all those programs, which this board is also tasked with approving
Yeah.
the contributions that we make.
Maybe we should say the board will continually review on at least an annual basis. Only because it seems like we're not just doing this one singular review, right? That's what I'm hearing from you. They're constantly giving us services, and it's really playing into the budget, the curriculum, it's touching a lot of pieces. And so because I was thinking it as a singular instance in time, right? But that's not really, because
It's a
that's
bit
what the
more
policy
dynamic.
is suggesting, but I think that's not really what it is in practice. The board, I don't think we need to really specify whether it's in committee or in a regular business board meeting, because it's, again, like Dr. Hirschman said, we're a committee of the whole. But just making that change, I think, would be good for that paragraph. Otherwise, I think this is a good revision to the policy.
You ready to move it forward?
I think so.
Yeah. That same first September meeting.
Yes. And there's no ARs here, because this is just
That's
with the
correct.
board. So, thinking about the difference between the other policies that have ARs, where there's a lot of district implementation of the policy, this is really board relations with the intermediate unit, so.
So I'm looking at the guidelines now, the second one down, liaison, me,
You.
currently. So just making sure that the district's best interests are promoted and concerns conveyed. Okay, so that would be me taking it then back to the IU, or is that the board sharing their concerns and interests with me? Like, is this more just me? Or, okay, I just wanna make sure I'm reading this, okay. The liaison, whoever that person might be at the time, but.
But I'm also assuming that if we participate in a program that the IU conducts and we engage their services, if the district is saying, this quality or the person keeps showing up late, you're not going to Dr. Larson to tell them, right? Like you've got your
right, yes.
own line
Yes,
of
right,
communication.
right.
So that, this concerns conveyed would be more of the kind of higher level, the governance, the funding, not the day-to-day operations.
I guess what I'm confused about is it's about the board receiving information, so I can then convey information. So when am I receiving the information from the board? Like, where's that dialogue between the board and me taking place, like, regarding DCIU? Is this, like, just reading the sentence, I understand that happens, but just like.
And I think some of that is in the board reports and in so, we get the budget information from the IU, or you bring that back from one of your board meetings at the IU. We share that with all of the other board members, and then you will articulate during your board report, the IU, at our last IU meeting, we spent a lot of time on the budget, those types of things, and then you would bring back, if there were specific questions that our board members had, or more information that they wanted about something, you could, bring that back.
So I would maybe add, I just feel like there's something missing in this sentence, so maybe to seek board input or something so that the district's best interest may be promoted and concerns conveyed. So I share information, there's feedback, because I'm thinking during a board report, I'm just sharing information, we're not having a discussion. So I just need something in that sentence that's like, information from the board can be shared to me, or I receive feedback, and then I can go promote these concerns.
Well, what if we just switch the order of those two paragraphs? Then it might make more sense, because if we're talking about the board continually reviewing the programs, and then we're talking about the liaison, then it sort of suggests that the liaison is discussing it while the board is continuing its review, right?
So that the district's best interest may be promoted and concerns conveyed, the liaison shall also ensure the board receives adequate information. Yeah, that works. Maybe I'm just tired.
Maybe.
Okay. Do we think we can bring this to the board with those?
I think I can get it done.
Okay, you got
I
this?
can get it done.
Great.
We'll get it done.
All right. Should we try one more policy, or should we wrap up?
I think volunteers we've looked at before, right?
It's a proposed policy.
Is this taking sections of ones that we've already?
Oh, no, it's not proposed. This is a current policy.
You have a current policy.
This is a
Yep.
change. I feel like,
Okay.
I guess maybe in other of the policies that referenced volunteers, some of this seemed familiar.
This one's pretty lengthy.
Yeah.
I'm happy to go through it.
I didn't have a whole lot of comments on it. Does anyone else? 918, I also didn't have many comments on. Campaigning.
916, I had some comments on the policy and the AR.
Say that number one more time.
916
916,
volunteers.
okay, yep. Yeah, I didn't really have any comments on
A comment I had on 916, the policy itself. So this is a red line of our current policy, and it's not, a lot of it is really just cleaning it up,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
right? I mean, just making sure that it's, emphasizing that it's the district, the employees, very minimal red lines. But a comment I had beyond that was, let's see here. The last paragraph under authority, all volunteers shall be expected to maintain professional, moral, and ethical relationships with district students and employees that are conducive to an effective, safe learning environment. I just think instead of saying moral and ethical, we say appropriate. I think moral is such a subjective term. I just don't know what that means. And so if we say professional and appropriate, I think those are readily understandable terms. And then on the AR,
I just had one comment
oh, sure, go
before we
ahead.
switched, and it was just a clarification. So under definitions, an adult is an individual aged 18 years or older. Can an adult in the circumstance apply to a student? Or is it meant to be not a student and like an enrolled student who's 18?
Well, it's typically not applying to a student. It's regulation of, I mean, I guess a student could be volunteer,
Yeah, because I
operating in a
think,
volunteer capacity.
I think in the ARs, there are some place where it talks about a student volunteering for, on district grounds and the clearances and things they would need. So I think in the definition, it might help to clarify the times in which that it might apply to
Okay.
a student, an enrolled student.
It's really interesting that we have to single out a tuberculosis test in our AR.
Yeah.
I had a question about that too. It's
think
up with the
that's-
TB test.
Yeah.
I would, because that caught my attention too, I would lead with the when required by and in accordance with, because it makes it otherwise be like, oh, I didn't get a TB test to go in and be a, like,
Yeah.
you know,
Is
help
this
with the
required to have in our
Halloween.
policy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I assumed it must have been a requirement because otherwise it's very random
It's, yeah.
of all the
Very
things.
random. It's
like-
also obviously not added. This is in our current policy and there've been,
Right.
our current AR and there's been no changes to it. So, yeah, it's very
That
odd.
was really.
Yeah, maybe switch it so it's clear that's when required, and then, yeah, I was like, is it something that's ever required, and is it required on a community basis, or are individuals somehow
Is there,
have
a
exposure risks
law
or
or
things?
regulation we can reference there?
In the AR,
Yeah.
and just actually cite explicitly to
Lit-
it.
Yeah, just be like, we
Sure.
didn't make this up.
Sure.
We have to
Right.
put this in here.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
And then, yeah, like so people are clear that it's like, it's not just whatever the school secretary being like, you need a TB
Where's
test.
your TB
and-
test?
Right.
I mean, it's also one of the requirements for employment too, right? So
Mhm.
it's
So weird.
not completely out of left field. But yeah, absolutely. I'll add the
It's in the school
citation.
building.
It
I'm
is.
sure it is,
It is.
but it's just
It was random.
out of context, yeah.
Mhm.
The other thing with the ARs is that they don't capitalize our defined terms.
Yeah, I have that too.
So we have a bunch of defined terms in the policy, like position volunteer and guest volunteer, and so we need to have those capitalized
Mhm.
throughout the AR.
One
And
other
that's
comment I had on the certifications, is can we put a reference into who, a member of the community who seeks to volunteer, who they would ask or how they submit the information, right? It says they shall submit the following information, but just a little more clarity on that process. And then there is a cost to doing this, and I didn't know if we wanted to have it be part of these ARs, that if the cost is a hardship for somebody, like if we have a means to help them, so that somebody's not prohibited from volunteering in the school because of some challenge in getting these done.
In the AR.
In the AR, yeah. And just the other comment at the very end, the last topic of the AR is acknowledgement. Each volunteer shall affirm in writing that they have been provided a copy of, have read and understand and agree to this. And I'm like, does that ever happen, right? Like, is that a upon request or a another way that we can do that? Because I don't know that I ever had to sign something, especially when volunteer here is the broader one of going in and helping with the bake sale or the
celebration.
Right, a classroom celebration. Like, we're not collecting that kind of paperwork, I don't think so, just to align it with practice.
So what do you want with that to read? The acknowledgement? Or do you want us to actually do it?
I was like, does this even happen? Like, I would delete it, but if there is some reason why we need to keep in, like, upon request to file
Upon
some
request of the
paperwork or something,
district?
yeah.
Like upon request of the district, a volunteer shall.
But otherwise, if you're not asked, it's not like nobody's out of compliance for it.
I would recommend that we either make everyone do it or we designate it by the type of volunteer rather than with that much broad discretion.
Mhm.
Okay.
So
Maybe the position volunteer.
Yeah.
position volunteer.
Right.
And do we have a good process for actually doing that? The position volunteers is a much smaller subset of people.
We'll come up with one.
Okay.
Sure. I mean, on the field trip chaperone paper, right? You can also
Yeah.
just say, we include this information. Tutors, coaches, activity advisors. Yeah, this seems like a group of people that we could have sign that. Okay.
All right.
Is it comfortable, are we comfortable moving this one forward too, if we can make those revisions?
I think these were pretty minor
Mhm.
changes. I think we can move this one forward, yeah. 916. So let's see here. So what we didn't get to tonight was policy 918, proposed Title I parental involvement, and 920 campaigning.
But we did get through a
pretty
lot.
good.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
pretty good. That was a long list.
All right. And so at 10 minutes to the top of the hour, we have reserved time for public comment. If anyone in the audience would like to speak. No? One? You do, yeah. You're welcome to come to the podium. Say your name. Okay, so you can, welcome, yes, you can say your name, confirm your residency in the township. Generally, we allow 3 minutes, but the committee meetings are a little more flexible. And your comments are being recorded and will be part of the broadcast.
So you would like for me to state my address?
Just confirm your residency in the
Oh,
township.
okay. Okay, hi, my name is Helen Milligan, and I'm a resident here in Haverford Township. And my children have attended Haverford schools, and I'm happy to say, I just want to say thank you to all you school board members. You're here these long meetings and doing lots of these proposals. And I wanted to come tonight because of the policy with the intermediate unit. And I just, I have a child who finished through the school district. He received a wonderful education. He had an IEP, was included. He has Down syndrome all through school. And I'm happy to say he's now started band camp today at Villanova, and he'll be attending Villanova University. And I have to, and I really have to credit Haverford, because if they hadn't included him from kindergarten and included him in the band, he was on the swim team, All of the teachers just embraced him, really encouraged him. He has so much self-confidence now. He works for the Eagles, he works at the Y, he works for Freddy's, and he has developed into a very confident, like self-assured adult. And I really do credit, and I'm so thankful for being here at Haverford. So I know sometimes you don't hear the compliments, but yes, I'm very happy about that. And my only unpleasant experience the entire time through the school district was with the intermediate unit. And he attended the technical school last year, and it was a horrible experience. And I really think that when you talk to Dr. Edelberg or you talk to people at the technical schools and with the intermediate unit, everything sounds so wonderful and the programs sound great in theory, but the way that they support children with intellectual disabilities or special needs, I think that our school district needs to have better oversight with that. And we need to make sure that what they're saying they're going to provide for our students that have intellectual disabilities truly does occur. Because I don't know where there was a lot of communication breakdown between what was happening with the IU at the technical school with our school district. The communication wasn't back and forth, also wasn't great with the parents as well. Also, his experience with the job trials was a very negative experience as well when he was younger. The job trials were really nothing he was interested in. And then when he didn't perform well, it looked negatively on him. He was supposed to be peeling off cilantro leaves at a kitchen for hours when he's already working at a Freddy's restaurant and can prepare a full meal at our home. So a lot of the jobs, and then we were told he wasn't ready to start employment and he needed more support. And here he had already started a job at Freddy's and had no job coaching and no job support, just natural supports there. So I think that having a parent's perspective and having a parent involved when we're looking at the IU programs could be really valuable for the school district for the next students coming up. I'm a professor at Thomas Jefferson in the Jefferson College of Rehabilitation Science, and I teach in the physical therapy program. And so I do have some background in how to support people with special needs and how to support people with intellectual disabilities. And I think that I actually used to work for Dr. Edelberg. So I wrote Dr. Edelberg and I have gotten no responses back. So I thought the best thing to do would be to come, and I saw that policy was going to be reviewed. So that's my recommendation, is to involve parents who have been involved with the technical school and the intermediate unit, because I also hear a lot of the same issues from other parents, not just from this school district, but other school districts in Delaware County. And thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.